Hi, welcome back. For this week's exercises, we use as running example a dance studio. So we have a number of teachers in our dance studio with names, ages, the tariff, what they cost if we hire them, the maximum level that they can teach, and the preferred level, the level that they like to teach most. For instance, Georgie here, even though he can teach up to level 5, he prefers to teach at level 1. So of course, on this data we want to do some sort of analysis. So let's start by analyzing for all of the levels we have, how many teachers do we have that teach that level? So we make a list of all the levels in our dance school, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the number of teachers. And for this we can use a count-if function, which is very similar to the sum-if function that we have seen in previous videos. So we're going to count for a given range in the teacher's worksheet, how many teachers are there for a given level. So we can just click the level. And what this actually means, even though it's not really clear, is we are calculating the number of teachers that is exactly equal to this level in the first column. And that's actually not what we want, because we want to calculate who is able to teach level 1. So someone who's able to teach level 3 is, of course, also able to teach level 1. So we would want, instead of this equality in the count-if, is we would like to have a comparison. We want to compare the level to the level in the teacher's worksheet. And we can try this, but this, unfortunately, even though it looks really nice, is not allowed Excel syntax. We have to make a little text out of this, a string, by adding quotes and an ampersand sign. And now indeed we get the comparison, what number of teachers we have that can teach up to a certain level. So everyone that can teach level 1 or higher. And you see that this is actually what we want, although there's one little mistake. In that final column here, we have 4 and 5. We expect to get 4, however, we get 3. And I guess you've seen my mistake because I forgot to insert the dollar signs when I dragged everything down. So if I want to have it correctly, I should not forget to use those dollars. And what's also a little bit cumbersome here is if I would accidentally use another column, let's say I make a mistake and I type E, it's very hard to see that I've made a mistake because D and E contain very similar values. It's hard to see for me where this formula points to. So these two problems, you shouldn't forget the dollars, and it's hard to see where a cell reference is pointing at, are nicely addressed by using named ranges. And that's the topic of this week. So let's go back to our example and see what we can do if we want to change that reference into a named range. We go to the teacher's worksheet and we just select a bunch of cells and type the name that we like to give to that range of cells. Super easy, you just go in the upper left corner and type the name. And if you've forgotten where a certain named range is located, you can use this little drop-down box and it automatically points you to the named range. And you can use this named range now in a function instead of the cell references. So I can select the named range. I even get a list here of all the named ranges I have in my spreadsheet, and I just drag it down. And now it's really easy to see what I'm calculating. It's easier because I can just read it like a book or like a sentence. I'm counting the maximum level of the teachers. I don't have to figure out where exactly I'm referencing to, and that's the power of named ranges. In the previous video, we've introduced a named range for a certain column in our spreadsheet. But of course, as you remember from one of the previous videos, spreadsheets have a very long lifespan. They can live up to 5 years. So at one point in our little dance studio, we are going to hire a new teacher. And if we do that, if we would just enter this new teacher into our teacher's worksheet, let's say his name is Harry and he's 25, we enter all his data. Unfortunately, if we then go to our planning worksheets, the formulas will not have been updated. We are still calculating based on the old named range. You see there's no change in the values here. And it's understandable if we go back to the teacher's worksheet and select the named range, from the drop-down list, you see that the maximum level is not including the last line in our worksheet. So if you want to update a given named range, you can use the name manager, as you see here. So the names are not fixed. You can always update them if your spreadsheet is changing. And now you see if you select max level again, all of the rows are included in the named range, and also our formulas are updated. So you can update your named range every time you make a change to the spreadsheet. However, this is dangerous because I'm sure at one point you will forget about all of the named ranges you have in your worksheet, and you'll forget to update one of them if you enter new data. So although it's possible with the named range manager to change your named ranges, this is not a preferred solution. You want to have your spreadsheet as automated as possible. An alternative solution is using an entire column for your named range. You can do that if we go back to the named range manager. You don't need to use a fixed column. You can say all the rows in my column. This is allowed syntax, and now you'll see that the whole column is indeed included in the named range. And if you add another teacher now, let's say we add a teacher called Shelley, the formulas will be updated to include this new teacher because, of course, it's calculating the entire column. So this is a good solution. However, there's also a downside to this solution. Because what happens now if we want to do some analysis on the teacher's worksheet? So let's say we want to calculate something like the most common level we have in our group of teachers. So we say most common level, and there's a formula for this in Excel called mode, really nice function that you can use to calculate the most common value in a bunch of cells. So this works. We know now that the most common level in our group of teachers is 3. However, because our named range is covering the entire column, this mode will now also be included in our calculation, and that's not what we want. So yes, you can use an entire column. However, then all these cells underneath our little data table are not usable anymore. They're sort of blocked because we cannot put calculations in them because the other calculations will use that data as well. So we are stuck here, and in the next video I will show you how to solve this problem. In the previous video I showed you how to use named ranges. They're really nice to use because it makes it a lot easier to read your formulas. However, there is still an open challenge because we want to be able to add new teachers to our worksheet without having to update either the formulas or the named range. So I would like to add, for instance, myself, I'm going to moonlight as a dance teacher, but I want those formulas to be updated automatically. And our current solution of using an entire column as a named range is actually no good because it blocks all of the cells underneath the data. So in this video, I'm going to show you an alternative solution that will address both of these problems. We can select our data. Let me remove myself. I will re-add myself later, and then we can select all the data in our worksheet, and we can insert a data table. Insert table right there. And then Excel asks us to select what data we would like in the data table, and also whether or not our data has headers, whether the first line describes what the data means. And first of all, we get this nice little visualization now on top of our data, but also what has happened is that all of these columns are automatically turned into something like named ranges labeled by the first line, labeled by the headers. So we can use that in our formula. We can say we want to count table 1, and then we get all of the columns in our table. We want to have table 1 maximum level, and now the formula works. And if we add another teacher to our roster, let me re-add myself as a dance teacher, you see that little corner thingy over there is going down with the table, and that shows where the table ends. So as soon as you enter a new row into the table is extended, and you don't have to update the named ranges. So let me add another teacher to show you that that little table thingy, the corner edge, is showing you where the table ends. So this is a solution that looks really nice. We have all the benefit of named ranges. However, we don't have to change anything in case we're adding teachers. But there's one thing that's super ugly. Actually, I hope you have been shouting at your computer screens again, "Oh no, I don't like the name of that table. How can you have a video about named ranges, names, with a table that's called table 1? That is crazy." You are right, my friend, that is crazy. Let's immediately change the name of the table because this is super ugly. We can do that, as I showed you in the previous video, with the name manager. But there is another solution as well to get rid of that ugly table 1. If we go back to the teacher's worksheet and select the data table, we get an additional tab in the ribbon. And there we can easily change our table without selecting anything. And you see that within the formulas, now also we get table teachers instead of table 1. We don't have to update anything. And there's more we can do in this ribbon tab. For instance, we can add slicers. This is really like a filter. You see the logo is similar to a filter, but it's more interactive. You can click all the tariffs you want and the data table will update automatically. So this is a nice little way, if you have changed your data into a data table, to interactively play with what is in your data set. And I encourage you, this is not really an exercise, but I encourage you to download this spreadsheet from our course page and to play with everything that's there, because a data table allows for a lot of playing. You can change the markup, you can add total columns or total rows. So download this spreadsheet and play with it because it's really, really nice to work with data tables. See you in the next video. In the previous video, we've turned our data into a data table and done some analysis on top of that. So what we want to do now is actually make our planning. We want to make a schedule for what teacher teaches what course on what day of the week. So ultimately, we're going to want something like this. But let's start with an intermediary step first. We have here a list of what courses are taught on what day of the week. So we want to have in our planning, initially we don't have the names yet, we just want to have X's on the spots where we have a course and empty spots or dashes on the places where we do not have a course for a given level. So we can do that with a function that we have already seen in the past, namely the find function. There we go. We can use the find function to search for a value in a string, as we've seen before. So we're going to find this 1 in the list of all the courses that we have on Monday. And we have found it. If we execute this formula, you see that indeed there is a 1 in this string on the first spot, so on 1. And here we have to add a $, of course, because if we are going to drag the function down, then we want to stay focused, stay pointing on the first line. And what you see now is that in case we do not find the 1, we get an error value. And we can catch that error value with a function called isError. So we can ask Excel, is this formula resulting in an error, yes or no? Or I should say true or false, because that will be the result of the formula. You see in the cases where we have found the 1, we get a false. Now we can slap an if on top of that. We can say, if we get an error, well then we want to have a dash. And if we do not get an error, then we want to have an X, so that we get X's on all the spots where we indeed have the given course on the given day. So, almost there, we can drag this formula to the right, and then we have our formula. Unfortunately, we have forgotten something. Again, another $. They are so annoying and so easy to forget, right? So if we add a $, to the formula, it will work. We can drag it to the right, and indeed we have got our function. But I do not particularly like this formula a lot. If you look at it, you have the $1 here and the other $1 there. I'm pretty sure that if you look at this formula tomorrow or maybe in a week or 3, you will look at this like, I don't really remember what is going on here. So we can make this formula a lot easier by using, I guess you can guess this, a named range. So if we take this first row of the spreadsheet and change that into a named range, let's call this horizontal levels. Then there's a special trick that we can use if we use a named range like this. What we can do is we can refer to that named range from a lower row. Let's have a look at how that looks like. If we just enter into this cell is equal to the named range, what we actually get is the intersection of the column that this cell is in and the row that represents the named range. So without doing anything, no cell references or no calculation, we're just pointing at the named range, we get the value at the intersection. And we can copy this down, no ugly dollars needed, and you'll see that you get the value from the named range. And if you go outside of it, then you get an error again. And we can use this little trick to beautify the formula that we just had. Let's have a look at how that looks like. So here again, in slow motion, I will show you what we've done, because this might take you a while for your brain to really understand how the intersection works. So if you refer from a cell to a given named range, what you will get as a result is the intersection of the column you are in and the named range. So we can use that in this function. Let's see how that goes. So we can get rid of that ugly little dollar. Let's remove it right away, and we can replace it by a reference to the named range. It's a lot easier to read. You don't need to think about the dollars. You don't need to think about the copying. You can just say, I'm pointing up to the horizontal levels named range. And this trick does not only work within one worksheet, it also works between worksheets. So if we go back to this lessons worksheet and call this column levels, we can also use it from this worksheet. So if we refer now back to the worksheet, no formulas needed, no functions needed, just a reference, you see that in the same fashion you get the intersection of the named range in the one worksheet and the row you are in currently. So we can use that as well. Here we're going to say I want to find the horizontal level in the levels. So your formula is a lot more readable, and you can just navigate the named ranges that are in the worksheet if you have forgotten where they are by using the drag down and selecting the named range within the formula. So from ugly dollars to readable functions with named ranges. So in this week's videos, I've taught you about named ranges. But of course, we're still running our dance studio, and the ultimate goal of this week's exercises is to actually complete a planning for our dance studio. So let's have a look at what we've done so far. We have improved our formula with use of named range. We've made a data table out of the teachers. We have all the information. There's one thing that we still need, and that's the availability. What teacher can teach on what days of the week, because not all of them are available all the time. But we have an issue now here, because in this worksheet, the days of the week are in this direction, whereas in the availability, they are in the other direction. Well, we can fix that by selecting this data and copying it with paste special in a transposed way. So all of the data is flipped, and then we can copy it back to the original position. But what has happened now is our worksheet has changed, but the named ranges have not. So the name is still horizontal levels, but in the spreadsheet, it doesn't mean levels anymore. It's actually days of the week now. And this is one of the risks, unfortunately, of using named range that I would like to call the basmati effect. Often in your spreadsheet, but also in normal programming, it happens that your code changes, your spreadsheet changes, but the values, the names you have given to them have not changed, and then you get things like this, where you have a container saying rice, but actually it contains cookies. And this is what happens in spreadsheets as well, and this is what has happened now in our example, where we have a name called horizontal levels, but it actually contains days of the week. So your exercise for this week, the first exercise, is to fix this. I would like you to use the name manager to change this name into an appropriate name, but also to fix the formulas in such a way that you are again retrieving data so that you get X's on the spots of the days and the levels. And the second assignment is to actually make the planning. So not just the crosses, but actual names for teachers that can teach at a given day for a given level. So that's your assignment. Use named ranges, but also all of the things we talked about in previous videos to complete this planning. Good luck!